Welcome to this A-Level Sociology revision blast on work poverty and welfare, looking at the impacts of poverty on different social groups. In this revision blast, we're going to focus on the first three specification points for the AQA A-Level Sociology specification for work poverty and welfare. And that looks at the nature, existence and persistence of poverty in contemporary society, including some of the theories of poverty, the distribution of poverty, wealth and income between different social groups, and responses and solutions to poverty by the state and by private, voluntary and informal welfare providers in contemporary society. Our first activity is a 5-4-3-2-1. In this activity, we're going to ask you to name 5 sociological concepts, theories or ideas, 4 ideas, concepts or theories, 3 ideas, concepts or theories, 2 and 1, and so on. You'll have 2 minutes to complete those. They're going to come up on the screen in a moment. Let's have a look at the topics that we want you to identify. So we'd like you to identify 5 social groups who are more likely to experience poverty, 4 definitions of poverty, 3 explanations for the persistence of poverty, 2 ways governments have looked to tackle poverty, and 1 measure of wealth. You're going to have 2 minutes to answer these questions. If you do need more time to complete the activity, press pause. Our 2 minutes starts now.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so time's up. Let's have a look at some of the answers. So 5 of the social groups that are more likely to experience poverty include women, the elderly, children, minority ethnic groups, and those with disabilities. You can also include in there social class. And of course, if you take an intersectional approach, then elderly women are more likely to experience poverty. Children from minority ethnic groups and children from working class backgrounds are more likely to experience poverty as well. And therefore you can make the connections between class, gender, ethnicity, age and disability. 4 definitions of poverty. Well, we could go with social exclusion, relative poverty, absolute poverty and relative deprivation. You can also look at state measures of poverty and the poverty line. 3 explanations for the persistence of poverty: the cycle of deprivation, the cultural poverty and the poverty trap, amongst others. These can be broken down into material and cultural factors. 2 ways governments have looked to tackle poverty. Well, one is through the creation of the welfare state, and second one is through increasing employment opportunities. You could have put in any specific individual policies in there. So for example, universal credit, tax credits, and different forms of unemployment benefit. And one measure of wealth is property ownership. You could have also included pensions or investments in that as well. Remember, wealth is different from income because it is accrued. In our next activity, we are going to do a 60-second challenge. You'll have 60 seconds to match the definition to the concept. We want you to match the letters on the left with the numbers on the right. If we have a look at our key concepts, so the poverty trap, cycle of deprivation, culture of poverty, poverty line, dependency culture, and relative deprivation. What we want you to do is match up those concepts to the definitions on the right-hand side of the screen. So socialization into norms and values that maintain the position of poverty, the costs of poverty leading individuals into further poverty, the sense of not having the same things as others in society who are similar to themselves, an objective measure of poverty based upon earning less than 60% of the median income, and when the costs of employment outweigh state benefits, socialization into norms and values whereby individuals expect to be taken care of by the state. Match up the concept to the definition. You have 60 seconds, starting now. And that's your 60 seconds up. If you do need more time, press pause on the video until you've completed the task. Let's have a look at some of the responses. So the poverty trap is when the costs of employment outweigh state benefits. That is, individuals aren't able to come off state benefits because they would lose more money than they would gain if they went into employment. The cycle of deprivation, this is when the costs of poverty will lead individuals into further poverty. A culture of poverty, very much a new right explanation, is that the idea is that there's a socialization into norms and values that maintain a position of poverty, that those in poverty have different norms and values to everybody else. The poverty line is an objective measure of poverty based upon earning less than 60% of the median income. A dependency culture, another new right idea, is a socialization into norms and values whereby individuals expect to be taken care of by the state, sometimes referred to as welfare dependency as well. And relative deprivation, a sense of not having the same things as others in society who are similar to themselves. And this is a subjective measure of poverty whereby individuals will compare themselves to people like them, and if they do not have the same goods or not able to access the same services, they may feel as if they are deprived. In our next activity, we're going to do a connection spinner, and we're going to look at some of the explanations of poverty, and we're going to apply them to specific groups. So we have 6 groups on the spinner, and what we want you to do is to identify how working class people are more likely to be in poverty, how women, children, the disabled, minority ethnic groups and elderly are more likely to be in poverty. We're going to spin the spinner, it will land on one of these groups, and we're going to look for an explanation for why that group is more likely to be in poverty. Let's give it a spin. Okay, so it's landed on the disabled. Why are disabled people more likely to be in poverty than those who are able-bodied? You give yourself a few moments to kind of think of some of the ideas. If we look at our explanations of poverty, maybe think about employment opportunities, maybe think about education, maybe think about access to services, maybe think about the costs that are involved. Maybe think about access to services, 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 maybe think about access to services Maybe also think about structural inequalities that exist when we're looking at poverty. Okay, so let's look at some of the explanations for why disabled people find them. Let's look at some of the explanations for why disabled people are more likely to be in poverty than able-bodied people. Well, inability to gain full-time employment. Now we can link this into not only the availability of flexible working, but also having to take time off for appointments or for periods of ill health. Employer discrimination, we can also use as an example of why disabled people are more likely to live in poverty, and cuts to benefits, particularly post 2010, where disability benefits were targeted under the policies of austerity. Let's look at a second group. Let's spin it again and see which one it comes up with. Women. Why are women more likely to be in poverty than males? Again, if we think about employment practices, we think about the costs, we think about opportunities that may be limited for women, and explain why women are more likely to be in poverty than males. Let's have a look at some of the explanations we've put forward. Women are more likely to be taking care of children and therefore may be more likely to work part-time than males. There is the dual burden that is placed on women. Women are less likely to be able to undertake overtime or unable to access higher levels of employment because of caring responsibilities. Women are more likely to have responsibility for children in a breakdown of a marriage, and more likely to be lone parents. And women are more likely to retire earlier than males and work long and live longer lives, which means they spend more time in old age and therefore more likely to experience poverty. There is that intersection of age and gender there. That means it's more likely to be older women, particularly older women on their own, who are likely to live in poverty. Now we're going to look at a speculative question here. It's an outline and explain question, one of the 10 mark questions that you might find on paper 2. And what we're going to do is we're going to analyse 2 ways in which government policies have impacted on the level of child poverty in the UK. Potential question you may get. What it's looking for you to do is to outline the ways in which policies, which is on the 3rd specification point, applies to the 2nd specification point, that is levels of poverty in different social groups, in this case children. In this stepping stones activity, we want you to complete a chain of analysis to illustrate the cause and effect of a policy on levels of child poverty. So how you might set out a paragraph like this is you may start by identifying your way, and we've identified the 2-child benefit cap as one way. And then at the end of the paragraph, you want to talk about the impact. So we're talking here and saying it has a negative impact on levels of child poverty. But why is this the case? What we may do first of all is we may identify who the 2-child cap has a negative impact on. And this is a link into sort of like family structure and the impacts of family structure on poverty. Families with 3 or more children are more likely to be in poverty than families with 2 or less children. So how might the 2-child benefit cap negatively impact on child poverty, particularly on those families who have 3 or more children? Well, it limits the amount of benefits that they may get. So, for example, universal credit and child tax credit. They can only claim for 2 of the 3 children, yet they will still have the costs of 3 children. We can now link this into poverty. We know that nearly half of children with 2 or more siblings live in poverty. So the inability to afford goods and services because they have a limited amount of benefits will have a negative impact on the level of child poverty, and we've created our chain of analysis. Let's look at a second way. So a second way is through the introduction of free childcare, and this time we're going to look at how it reduces the number of children in poverty. So how might the introduction of free childcare reduce the number of children that are in poverty? Well, what we can look at here is the Conservative policy that introduced up to 30 hours free childcare for parents who are working. This includes lone parents and families where both parents work. This enables lone parents and couples to increase their earnings through employment. It gives them more disposable income, and it reduces the number of children in poverty. At least in theory this is the case, as we know that childcare costs are one of the largest expenses for families, and that many working families are below the poverty line. So the introduction of free childcare will have a positive impact on reducing the number of children in poverty. Our final activity is a multiple choice question, and we're going to focus on the provision of welfare in this section. First question, which term describes welfare provided by charities and community organisations? Is it A, private welfare, B, state welfare, C, informal welfare, or D, voluntary welfare? Which is the correct answer? A, B, C, or D? And the correct answer is voluntary welfare. Question number 2. Which approach argues that the welfare state should be reduced? Is it the social democratic approach, the new right, Marxist, or feminist approaches? The correct answer is the new right. They believe in a small state and personal responsibility. They would argue that gaining employment is a way in which you can reduce poverty. Question number 3. Which of the following is an example of private welfare? Is it A, a food bank, B, the NHS, C, loan from a friend, or D, private hospitals? And the answer is, of course, it's private hospitals. Food bank is an example of a voluntary welfare, NHS, state welfare, loan from a friend, informal welfare, and private hospitals would be a sign of private welfare. Question number 4. What is the term given to describe a combination of different welfare approaches? Is it A, a mixed economy, B, privatisation, C, universal welfare, or D, combined practice? And the correct answer is A, a mixed economy. This is where there will be private welfare, state welfare, and also welfare from the voluntary sector, as well as individuals relying upon informal welfare from friends and family. And it is more common that in contemporary society that there is a mixed economy of welfare approaches. And finally, for this revision blast, question number 5, what is the term given to the practice of giving benefits only to those who qualify for them? Is it A, state, B, universal, C, informal, or D, means tested? And the correct answer is D, means tested benefits. State benefits refers to benefits that are received from the government. Universal benefits are available to all. Informal benefits are from friends and family, and means tested benefits is where they look at your income and whether you meet qualifying criteria in order to obtain that benefit from the government. That concludes this A-level Sociology revision blast on work, poverty and welfare, looking at the impacts of poverty on different social groups. Thanks for watching.